First of all, I think it was great to hear like everything went very smoothly for Ivan. I'm going to tell a slightly different story here. Um, so my name is Yaxing Chen. I'm an engineering manager at Apple. My team basically works on providing in-memory data stores for every Apple product as an infrastructure. So for example, TV, music, AML, App Store, etc. Everybody uses our service. Redis was one of the largest infrastructure we provide as part of our portfolio. So today, my team is focusing on, for obvious reasons, we're focusing on moving all of our large Redis fleet to Valkey. And as part of that process, we did run into some backward compatibility issues that kind of stopped us from proceeding on the fleet-wide migration. And today, I'm just going to give a very short talk about that challenge and what kind of solutions did we put together to unblock ourselves. So to start with, I'm just going to go very high-levelly about the migration process. Likely, we all pretty much followed a very standard approach. This is going to be demonstrated as a -1, but n+1, all those applies the same here. So assuming we need to migrate a shard with one primary and two replicas, to minimize the impact on read and write availability, we just take down one follower, bring it back up as Valkey, let it do for async with the primary, and we move on to the same other replica. Before we migrate the primary, we do perform a proactive failover and switch the primary to one of the Valkey replicas, and then kill and move the last Redis replica node and move it to Valkey. So that completes the whole shard migration. Now the question is, what if something goes wrong in this process after you finish this one, right? What if there are a lot of edge cases and failures in production that we couldn't catch in QA or dev environment? I think someone was mentioning fuzzy tests in one of the earlier talks. But even with that, there could be issues that we face, like performance degradations for, Redis. Valkey has over 200 commands. We did see some kind of weird performance degradations for very specific command only happened for a certain traffic pattern that one or two specific use cases hit in production only. So, or maybe it's not an issue on the server. There was a weird client library people are using. It does not just work well with new version of Valkey. So when those things happen, there's a production impact. So our goal is to always quickly mitigate and minimize the business impact, whatever the cost is, right? So in production, the dependencies likely are very complicated. There could be multiple layers of applications, data pipelines, different service calls stacked together, and they might be significantly impacted even by a very small incompatibility. So this is why we think rollback is the way to make sure we quickly recover and get back to the last known good state. The rollback could be also required as part of the certain compliance and SLA requirements as an infrastructure providers. However, during our migration from Redis Valkey, we did find out it's not always possible. So let me talk about that. So in our infrastructure, for historic reasons, we actually run a mix of versions. And most of the versions we run are prior to the license change, of course, including from 6, 0, 6.2, and 7.0. Our goal right now is to move it to at least Valkey 7.2. Ideally, we want to move it to Valkey 8 directly. But we kind of know they're not backward compatible in this case. So here's a table just to illustrate which ones are compatible, which ones are not. As this one shows, starting from Redis 7, there are incompatible changes introduced to Redis core, basically making the downgrade impossible. For example, we will not be able to downgrade from Valkey 8 to Redis 7.2 or 7.2 to 7.0 or 6. When you try to do that, right, try to downgrade between those versions, you're going to hit this failure at starting up or the for async because the incompatible RDB format. This issue, I believe, has also been brought up by community and raised in Redis GitHub. However, this was not addressed by Redis because the claim was downgrade was not required because the upgrade is supposed to work without a problem. But of course, we know that's not always true in a complicated production environment. Like I said, there are many different usage and data patterns that can trigger different edge cases. So I'm trying to talk through what caused the problem and why it happened. So Redis was complaining about RDB format issue when trying to downgrade. So we know the issue is somewhere in the RDB file. And this is a very high-level illustration of the RDB file structure. I highlighted the middle part, which is the important piece, the database section. So this part holds critical information of the RDB file structure of the Redis and Valkey data. It includes the database size, the actual key value encoded in key value, etc. So we can focus on the value encoding type. This is the flag telling Redis and Valkey basically how the value is encoded. We can focus on the encoding used for those 4 data structures now, list, sets, hashes, and sorted sets. So when those values are small, for example, a very short list, Redis and Valkey encodes the value differently with a specific encoding method. This is basically to enhance memory CPU efficiency by reducing the per entry overhead. In Redis 6 and older versions, ziplist is the encoding type. So in a ziplist, every single entry contains the length of the previous entry, the current entry, and its actual data. By default, there's only 1 byte allocated to store the previous entry's length. Now, if we want to increase or change the data size of each entry, when it grows to be beyond 253 bytes, we're going to need to update the next entry's previous length field. We need to expand that from 1 byte to 5 bytes. And that alone, so the reason for that is when you want to accommodate the larger size number for the previous entry. So that change alone can trigger the corresponding entry to grow again beyond 253 bytes, and therefore need to update the next entry, and so on. So it could trigger a cascading update effect, basically. In the worst case, 1 entry update triggers the whole list to be updated. This is the reason why Redis introduced the listpack in 7.0 for list, hashes, and sorted set, and then later introduced the same encoding to sets in 7.2. The reason I'm calling out this is because this explains why 7.0 and 7.2, they're not compatible. And they use the same encoding, but for different data structures here. So listpack, they do not store the length of the previous elements anymore. Instead, it only stores the length of the current entry and made it available at the end of the entry so you can do the backward traversal. So any updates in this case on an existing entry will no longer trigger the cascading update, and it's very efficient in this case. Now let's go back to the picture. For all those 4 data structures, when they encode the small values, they were changed from ziplist to listpack in 7 and 7.2. So when doing a rollback, initially when I showed the picture, when we killed the instance and starting up as the rollback was the older version Redis will see the RDB dumped by the previous more advanced RDB versions, or getting the new RDB versions from the new Valkey primary because of the furry sync. In that case, it's going to see a different encoding type here, and it's not going to recognize that. So it will fail at startup or for async. Now, to address this problem, after we have the 40 understanding, we just went back to 6.2, and Redis 7. We made a patch on each version. So on 7, we essentially made a patch to, we backported the listpack change in 7.2 for sets, and in 6 and 6.2, we implemented the conversion between the listpack and the ziplist. So when you start up, when those older instances start up reading from the newer version of RDB files, it will be able to understand the new encoding format, do the conversion, populate the data structure accordingly in memory. So this basically makes sure they can, it's a relaxed version check, and it can make sure they can still load the new RDB files. After this change, we basically are able to solve the backward compatibility problem for all the new versions and old versions, and we are now proceeding with that patch to roll out to all of our fleet. And this is an example to show, like, I don't know if it's visible, but essentially this is Redis 7 instance with our patch successfully loading an RDB generated by Valkey 8. So with this, basically unblocks our fleet migration. That's what we're proceeding with. And for this change, we did file 3 PRs against the Valkey corresponding branch, but just to clarify here, we're not merging those PRs because this is supposed to be patched on the old Redis versions. So these are just there as an examples. And you guys can, who are interested, can check it out and potentially patch your own version if you are also facing the similar challenges. All right, that concludes my talk. Thanks, everyone.
Any questions? Anybody? Oh, Victor.
Yeah, thanks. We're also very interested in the downgrade. It's a killer feature for us as well. Ericsson. There is another thing except for the RDB that's about replication of strings with the expire. So from, I think, Redis 6.0 started to send it as a set with the pxat attribute, and it's not understood by Redis 5, for example. Did you even encounter that one?
We don't have Redis 5.
Okay,
in our fleet, which is good, right? Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to say that it's not only RDB. In worst case, it can be also the command replication itself.
Yes, that's a good call out.
But we will try to avoid doing those things in the future.
Yeah, this is the main one we hit. So yeah, but thanks for calling it out.
Other questions? We'll do Joseph then Hari.
Hi there. I was wondering, and sorry if you said it already, what was the reason why you had to roll back in the first place?
Right. So let me just go back to the slide. So first of all, when we did the 6.2 to 7 upgrade, we hit performance issues for a few of our critical use cases. And one of them is actually not on server, like I mentioned just now. It was some client they're using, which didn't work well. But the first thing we have to do is always to roll back. So that's why. But these are the main principles why we need the rollback capability. So because of that issue, we kind of stopped rolling upgrades. That's why we ended up in this situation as well. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Hi. So how far into the future do you need to support the rollback mechanism? Because sometimes you won't be able to use the latest engine version features. Like once you go to 9.0, you might want to use hash field expiration.
Right. I think that's a different problem than this one. We all understand if they're using new features, you cannot go back. That is not expected.
Okay, that is not expected.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions? Okay. None? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.